Hello, everyone. Welcome to the International Methods Colloquium. I am Justin Essery, an Associate Professor of Politics and International Affairs here at Wake Forest University. The IMC is a periodic online interactive seminar discussion on the application of quantitative statistical methodology to the social sciences, sponsored by Wake Forest University and also by Springer Publishing. This week's speakers, I should say, are Catherine Reyes-Housholder from Pontificia Universidad Catolica de Chile, and Santiago López Cariboni from Universidad de la República de Uruguay. And my Spanish accent is obviously amazing. Their talk is entitled Parallel Conjoint Experiments for Measuring Gender Stereotypes and Analyzing Preferences. The talk will last about 30 to 40 minutes, after which point we will take questions from the audience. You can ask a question using the Zoom Q&A button that appears at the bottom of your webinar window. You may ask any questions at any time during the talk, but all questions will be held until the end of the presentation unless it's something very urgent, like, we can't hear you. If you wish to be recognized and ask your question via audio, please indicate this in the Q&A text box, or you can also click the raise hand button in the webinar. Otherwise, I will read your question aloud during the Q&A period. A link to the paper and slides will be available in the Zoom webinar chat window so that you can refer to those throughout the presentation. And now I'd like to welcome Catherine and Santiago to the International Methods Colloquium. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Justin, for the invitation to present at the International Methods Colloquium. I've been a fan of the IMC for many, many years. So for me in particular, it's an honor to be here. So this is a work in progress with my co-author Santiago, and he and I are very interested in any sort of feedback, suggestions, or questions that you may have. We thank the Center for Social Conflict and Cohesion Studies, COES, which is an interdisciplinary center here in Santiago, Chile. They provided generous funding for our multi-country study, which included the US, Chile, Uruguay, and Brazil. And we're very thankful as well for the research assistance of Luciana Cantera. Okay, next slide. So here's the agenda for the talk. First, I'm going to motivate our research goals, which are to measure gender stereotypes and estimate their causal effects on voter evaluations. And so I do this by pointing out some of the major contributions in recent candidate sex studies and gender stereotypes research, and I also note some of their limitations. I'll then move to introduce our focus on gender stereotypes as high dimensional quantities of interest. We focus in this project on descriptive gender stereotypes and not prescriptive or proscriptive. And we argue that conjoints can usefully uncover the content of these stereotypes, and parallel experiments can serve to estimate their causal impacts on vote choice and viability. And then I'll present two of our overarching hypotheses for the study. I then am going to turn it over to Santiago, who's going to lay out our theoretical assumptions in measuring gender stereotypes with machine learning techniques and identifying their causal effects. So he also will formally introduce our quantities of interest, that is specifically the MCE of traits on beliefs about candidate sex, as well as the effect of these stereotypical associations on vote choice and viability perceptions are two dependent variables. He then will present our parallel conjoint design. Overall, our results concerning the content of gender stereotypes, and in this presentation, we're only showing the results for the United States. The results appear pretty much in line with existing theories of gendered leadership styles, and also with existing research that suggests that voters associate female politicians with greater moral integrity or a lower probability of being accused of corruption. Moreover, we find that perceptions of a candidate profile corresponding to a female rather than a male presidential candidate, which are measures of masculinity or femininity and masculinity, those actually exert pretty large positive effects on vote choice. So voters seem to prefer these ideas about candidate femininity, but these gender stereotypes do not have an effect on viability perceptions, at least in our US sample. We conclude that this method could generalize to study the content and causal effects of other kinds of stereotypes. For example, those kinds of stereotypes based on race, ethnicity, or religion. Okay, next slide. So overall, there's little evidence of demand side explanations for women's underrepresentation in politics. Voters in the aggregate do not seem to prefer male candidates. So a recent meta-analysis, this is pretty groundbreaking, examined 67 candidate sex studies, and these 67 studies were conducted in 12 countries. And all of these studies included candidate sex as an independent variable of interest, and the meta-analysis revealed actually a small pro-female bias. There's few experimental studies on viability perceptions in candidate sex, but this other outcome variable is theoretically relevant. It could be, for example, that voters prefer female candidates, but they actually view them as less likely to win an election than their male counterparts. So this leads to the question of, why would voters support female politicians? A first set of reasons points to gender stereotypes, specifically descriptive stereotypes that link female politicians with traits that some voters may desire in political candidates. So some of these instrumental reasons are nicely laid out in Sebamatsu's 2002 study, in which she outlines a gender schema theory. So it could be, for example, that voters stereotypically associate female politicians with stereotypically feminine leadership styles, dialogue-based management, horizontal leadership, et cetera, and they actually prefer those kinds of leadership styles. It also could be that voters associate female politicians with competency on compassion issues, for example, health, education, poverty, and because they're deeply concerned about those issues, they prefer female politicians. Voters may associate women with greater moral integrity, so they may prefer women because of that, particularly as corruption is a valence issue in which virtually all voters agree that corruption is bad and moral integrity is good. Voters in some countries, for example, the US, may associate female politicians with left-leaning ideologies, so leftists in some countries may prefer women because of this stereotype as well. These are all instrumental reasons based on descriptive gender stereotypes. But there's also, alternatively, it could be that voters prefer female politicians because of non-instrumental reasons or reasons that are relatively unrelated to gender stereotypes. So these non-instrumental reasons could relate to gender ideology, using the term from Derslati and Kelly. So it could be that feminist voters have this baseline preference for greater descriptive representation of women in politics. And therefore, based on the sex of the candidate, not these other traits that are stereotypically linked to women, they prefer female candidates or politicians. On the flip side, it could be that voters prefer male politicians as well because of their sex, not because they think that men are, for example, going to promote the issues that they care about. So these kinds of voters, masculinist, have a baseline preference for male dominance or the male-dominated status quo. Okay, next slide. So a main limitation of these candidate sex studies that I mentioned earlier is that they can't differentiate or adjudicate among these different kinds of instrumental reasons based on linkages between desired traits in candidate sex, that is gender stereotypes, and they can't differentiate these instrumental reasons from these gender ideological reasons, okay? It's basically because these studies don't measure gender stereotypes. So another way to think about this problem is to refer to masking. So the AMCE of candidate sex actually picks up the effects of a preference for greater descriptive representation of women, as well as a fraction of the effect of these instrumental gender stereotypes, which again would, in this case, would refer to the traits that are not included in the conjoint table. So the masking problem is actually partial in these candidate sex studies. It probably masks at least some of these gender stereotypical traits or these instrumental reasons that people may prefer female politicians, but we're not sure which ones because we're not measuring gender stereotypes in these studies. So research much research has done exactly this, measured gender stereotypes. And one of the key findings of this research is that stereotypes for female politicians are not the same as stereotypes about women in general. Okay. But these studies are not conducted sort of in an electoral setting where we're choosing among candidates and thinking about vote choice as well. So it's unclear whether stereotypes matter for vote choice or viability perceptions. Most of these studies are also single country studies, especially based in the US. Okay, next slide. We have two main research questions. Which traits do voters associate with male and female candidates? And what's the causal impact of these gender stereotypes? That is, these multifaceted associations between traits and candidate sex on voter evaluations. So we have two goals. We want to measure the content, and this content is multidimensional. It refers to multiple traits of gender stereotypes in an electoral scenario. And we want to estimate the causal impact of these stereotypes on two independent or dependent variables, vote choice and viability perceptions. Okay. So why conjoints? So political candidacies involve many attributes. And so standard conjoints traditionally have been used to understand the average marginal causal effects of a variety of candidate traits on vote choice and other similar dependent variables. So we, as I already mentioned, candidate sex, whether the candidate is a man or a woman, can transmit multiple pieces of information. Gender is usually conceptualized in terms of myriad traits. So masculinity involves myriad traits, femininity involves myriad traits. So we need a tool to enable multidimensional measurements of gender stereotypes, particularly for political candidates, okay? And conjoint designs therefore become useful in that regard. So we study hypothetical presidential candidates in 4 countries. Today, we're only going to show the results for the United States. Okay, next slide. And we have 2 overarching hypotheses that these candidate attributes and their interactions, which are typical in conjoint in the standard candidate choice experiments, that these attributes and their interactions affect voters' beliefs about whether a whole hypothetical profile would correspond to either a female or a male presidential candidate. And here with this first hypothesis, we're innovating by turning candidate sex into an outcome variable rather than an independent variable. The second hypothesis is that these high dimensional gender stereotypes influence our 2 dependent variables of vote choice and viability perceptions. And now I'll hand it off to Santiago.
Okay, thank you very much, Catherine. So I'm going to lay out the methods first, and then I'll talk about an application of this method, as Catherine already explained. So our quantity of interest is a simple one. We want to know what is the effect of gender stereotypes on political outcomes, such as political support or beliefs about viability of candidates. So this involves two challenges that Catherine very well described. So we need measuring multidimensional context of stereotypes, and we also need to somehow get a strategy that credibly ensures exogeneity conditions to learn about the causal effects of stereotypes. So we take a design-based approach in the sense that we think of 2 parallel experiments in which survey respondents are assigned to either a measuring sample where they take part of an experimental measure of stereotypes, or they either actually take part of the testing sample in which they participate in a vote choice experiment. So now I'm going to talk a bit about what stereotypes are in statistical terms for us, and I'm going to relate that to a well-known problem that exists in survey experiments, which is the violation or non-violation of the inequivalence of a background information assumption that the literature on survey experiment has revised quite deeply. So the idea of stereotypes is that they refer to a specific form of inequivalence about background features produced by a single informational trait. In this case, the informational trait could be candidate sex, whether the candidate is a man or a woman. So, what stereotypes are actually picking up is a change on the beliefs about background information given a given piece of information theta, which is in our case candidate sex. So if we want to design what stereotypes are, well, we can design stereotypes as this basically this difference, right? And this difference doesn't have to be related to a single trait, right? But it could be a collection of traits. So we can think of stereotypes as the difference in background beliefs for a given information that the candidate is a male or a female versus a candidate who is a male. So this definition of stereotypes, now we have to use it in a sense that allows us to design an experimental measure. So what we are doing in this part of the study and what this part of the design is actually telling us is that we can assign subjects to different realizations of candidates characteristics B, right? These are the background beliefs of candidate sex, and then collect the report beliefs of candidate gender, right? So what we are saying here is that the change in background beliefs given information about candidate sex is going to be the same as the change in beliefs about candidate sex or candidate gender, depending on the background information or the information that we normally see in candidate profiles in a population that is randomly drawn, typically in conjoint experiments. So with this idea at hand, we can lay out the underlying assumption of our design, which is the effect of candidate gender set on beliefs about background feature B is going to be the same as the effect of that background feature on beliefs about candidate gender. So this actually reflects the fact that heuristics are cognitive processes of association between different elements, and our design wants to be wants to reflect that as better as possible. So our experimental measure of stereotypes involves an experiment that allow to map candidate stereotypes being either masculine or feminine across a set of background beliefs of gender, right? So what we are doing, what we are actually achieving with the fact of implementing an experimental measurement of stereotypes is ensuring the independence of potential outcomes in the beliefs of candidate gender against the assignment of candidate traits. That means that no pretreatment covariate related to respondents level characteristics such as ideology, sex, or any other education or any other respondent level information can actually confound our measure, right? Because our measure is basically picking up the average relationship between candidate profiles and beliefs about candidate sex. So with this design-based measure of stereotypes, it's going to allow us to directly relate the background characteristics of political profiles to gender beliefs. However, there are many different ways of doing this. And if the simplest form would be here to think about, well, how do you normally analyze standard analysis of conjoint experiments such as marginal means or average marginal component effects. But because we are theorizing that stereotypes are are high dimensional, reflect high dimensional treatments, we think that there might be high dimensional interactions between all the candidate traits that affects beliefs about candidate sex. And there is a large literature on this about how to estimate using agnostic approaches such as machine learning to efficiently assess the effect of these high dimensional treatments. So for now, in this case, we only employ regression forests, which the main prediction here, the main goal here is to have a precise prediction of stereotypes. We are not analyzing substantively what are the most important interactions between candidate traits to explain beliefs about candidate gender. So we're gonna again predict classifications for both the training and the testing samples. So for both for the set of profiles that belong to the both samples, to the two samples in our study, and therefore we're gonna we can refer to S and S prime respectively, and this this classification is gonna depend on the latent variable S asterisk, which is the basic prediction that we take from the machine learning model. So if we use a model trained in the testing sample and we predict the stereotypes under this rule in the testing sample, then we're going to have a distribution of classification distribution for feminine and masculine profiles that is going to allow us to estimate the effect of femininity and masculinity on support for different candidates. This is because given that our assignment to different traits in the conjoint in the candidate choice experiment is random, therefore the stereotypes that are being estimated and produced with the same profile, with the same population of political profiles, is going to be also a random assignment of stereotypes, right? Because in the two experiments, we have exactly the same, we're drawing candidate profiles from exactly the same distribution of candidate traits. So what we are ensuring here is the fact that we can learn about changes in predicted stereotypes and their effects on changes in support for different candidates. So in our parallel candidate choice experiment, we are making no reference to any sort of associations to traits and gender. We don't mention anything about gender, and in fact, respondents only participate in a candidate choice experiment where they just cast different votes or elect within different candidates across 6 tasks, and that's it. So what we are doing is creating in this sample a predicted variable of stereotypes given what we learned in the first experiment. So we're going to estimate the following model, assuming that voters do not observe the traits that are being used for building the stereotypes variable in the second experiment. So now we're going to talk about an empirical application. So this is a study that we run in the US, and it has just about 2,000 respondents. And for the first experiment, where we use for measuring stereotypes, we have 2 types of outcome variables. One is the forced choice variable, asking whether respondents believe that the candidate is a man or a woman. And we also have an unforced choice a question that allows respondents to to say that both candidates are of either sex. And then respondents go through 6 different tasks across experiments. In the standard candidate choice experiment, we have the standard outcome questions, both the forced choice and unforced choice question for candidate support. And we also added a second outcome questions, which is measuring perceptions of viability of different candidates. So basically the perceptions of whether each candidate is able to win a presidential election. So this is the table of attributes and values from which we implement full randomization and create a multivariate distribution of political profiles. That is, of course, is going to be a uniform multivariate distribution across all different attributes. So we have some attributes that people normally observe in electoral campaigns, such as age, the number of children, social class, experience. And then we have also a bunch of attributes that are more difficult to directly observe. And it's the type of things that people normally try to guess about what is exactly going to be, or what is the type of candidates they have in front, such as whether the candidate is going to be corrupt, or what are the real ideological preferences, issue priorities, what are the most important traits this candidate have, and what is the decision-making style. So there is no rule to the selection of the different traits, in not only in ours but in any type of conjoint experiment. And how do we select the different traits and the different values is part of the decisions that any researcher should really think about when implementing this method. So I'm going to show you now here the results for the first experiment. Recall that the outcome variable here is beliefs about candidate gender. So when we first designed this experiment with Catherine, we thought that we're gonna, likely to get a bunch of non-results, because no one will be able to know or to say what is the sex of a candidate if we just only say age, social class, experience, and so on. But however, we get a picture that is completely different to what we expected initially, because as you can see, there are very strong effects of different traits on beliefs about candidate gender. Therefore, voters are highly able to assign candidate sex to political profiles. And if we look at the effects across the different type of outcome questions, well, we basically get sort of the same story. So we believe that using all of the different type of questions kind of give us an unbiased sort of estimate of the different traits, of the effect of different traits on candidate gender beliefs. So we emphasize that for illustration purposes, we emphasize that researchers using this method can assume what information voters do not fully observe, and therefore are going to impute given candidate sex. Therefore, how do a researcher constructs the definition, the substantive definition of stereotypes, is basically what are the traits that are going to be used in the analysis stage of this method to be assumed as unobservable by voters, right? So here we use probably many of them, like corruption ideology, issue priority, salient traits in the praise and the praise and decision-making style. However, we do not use as a part of the stereotypical consideration by voters age, social class, the number of children, and experience. This means that what we are assuming here is that age, social class, children, and experience are going to have direct effects on voting, right? And all of the other attributes are going to be masked by gender perceptions, right? That this is the assumption by which we decide how to analyze, how to estimate the stereotypes. So when we predict what is the stereotype of political profiles in the testing sample, where voters only vote, right? So they do not hear or say anything about candidate sex. We observe that, you know, if we take the median profile in our distribution is actually a male, right? Because you know, these are probabilities of being female, and anything below 0.5 is coded as male profiles, right? Or masculine profiles, actually. So this is in a sense is very natural, because what respondents are telling us is that from the entire distribution of profiles, they believe that there are more masculine profiles than feminine profiles, right? And this is perfectly consistent with the fact that there is less women in politics than males. So how can we assign a masculinity, a femininity in the second experiment, such that the assignment is it has you know, we have an assignment with equal probabilities. So what we do is to take from the testing sample a random sample where the probability of a profile being a female is exactly 0.5, right? So we're going to analyze a subset of the testing sample, such that we have the same number of profiles coded as males and masculines, and the same number of profiles coded as feminine profiles. And as you can see, we have a high certainty on a number of profiles that should be coded as masculine ones, and the same happen with feminine profiles. And there is a group of political profiles that are of candidate profiles that are relatively uncertain, right? So we are going to adjust our standard errors in the estimation by our uncertainty in the in this classification. So this is the distribution. So once we take this sample from the second experiment, this is what we are actually doing to the distribution of candidate profiles. As you can remember, we said that neither age, children, or experience are going to be part of the stereotype measure. Therefore, for these traits, we expect that the distribution is uniform, right? Both for feminine and masculine profiles. However, we have included in the estimation of gender stereotypes, corruption, ideology, salient traits, and decision-making styles. So if you want to just take the example of corruption, you see that for the just about 1,500 profiles that are being coded as feminine, well, you know, most of them were never accused of corruption, and exactly the opposite happens with masculine profiles, right? So this is how do we produce a very specific imbalance in background beliefs about candidates that is reflecting what respondents in the first experiment were telling us their stereotypes are, right? So now we're going to estimate the effect of stereotypes together with all other traits that are assumed to have a direct effect on the outcome. So if we move toward the results, we can see that feminine profiles are more preferred in comparison to what they have higher chances to be elected in comparison with masculine profiles, and this difference is about 7%. However, respondents don't believe that feminine profiles are more likely to win elections than masculine ones. And the estimation of these effects, right, and do not need to include all other treatments considered to have a direct effect here. So they are perfectly orthogonal to the distribution of masculine and feminine profiles. So this is in a sense, this is a nice feature because we are so our this method allows for analyzing the results in exactly the same way that any conjoint expense. We are getting basically average marginal component effects of masculine and feminine profiles that are condensing the associations between different traits and beliefs of candidate gender. So we're gonna stop here and give Catherine the chance to talk about our conclusions in this project.
A main contribution of this study is sort of to move us away from thinking about the causal impact of candidate sex and to sort of think about what does candidate sex mean in terms of gender stereotypes. And we argue, throughout this paper that conjoint experiments can uncover the content of multidimensional gender stereotypes, and machine learning techniques enable us to identify relevant interactions and to enhance the efficiency of our estimates of voters' perceptions of candidates' femininity and masculinity. It's important to point out that when we talk about candidates' femininity, we're talking in the context of presidential politics as well. So when we think about femininity, about women in general, many of those stereotypes are not going to necessarily apply when we're talking about presidential politics. Overall, you can go to the next point. Overall, our results are pretty consistent with existing literature on gender stereotypes. It's important to remember that not all gender stereotypes are electorally relevant, and that's something else that you can explore in our results. We also find, of course, that voters do seem to prefer candidate profiles that are associated more with the female sex, with female politicians, than masculine profiles. So more masculine profiles, that is greater certainty or consensus about a presidential candidate being viewed as male, actually perform worse in terms of vote choice, but not in terms of viability. So we do see divergence in terms of the impact of these stereotypes on vote choice as our first dependent variable versus viability, our second dependent variable. And so we also, argue throughout this that parallel conjoint experiments can be used to understand not just gender stereotypes, but actually other kinds of stereotypes based on race, religion, region. And we can also use these parallel conjoint design to understand and estimate the effects of voter preferences and electoral viability perceptions. Other than that, we're very grateful to be here and to hear any kind of feedback or questions that the audience may have. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Catherine and Santiago, for that presentation. At this point, Catherine Reyes-Housholder and Santiago López Cariboni are available to take questions from the audience. You can ask a question using the Zoom Q&A button that appears at the bottom of your webinar window. If you wish to be recognized and ask your question via audio, please indicate this in the Q&A text box or just click the raise hand button. Otherwise, I will read your question aloud. And while we're waiting for some questions to come in for the audience, I have a few questions. So my first question is, I just want to make sure I understand the idea correctly. When a voter votes for a woman instead of a man, that is in part because of certain hidden traits that they impute, right, to that person because of their gender, right? So, for example, I look at Catherine and I look at Santiago, and I say Catherine is more likely to be trustworthy or have higher integrity or whatever, right? Am I getting that correctly? Okay, so then the follow-on question is, what I want to estimate then is the probability that I think you have a trait, given that you're a woman. But I think experiment 1 estimates the probability that you're a woman, given that you have a trait. So how is it that you're going to convert? I mean, there's Bayes' rule, right? But how is it that you're going to? I don't see you converting one to the other. Is that your plan? And if so, how does that work?
So I can start a response to this question, and I think Santiago can finish. So we do think that there's these instrumental reasons why people may prefer female politicians, which could be different from their baseline preferences, that they just want to see more women in politics, for example, or the opposite, they want to see more
descriptive representation. Yeah,
right, that desire for that. So in including the traits, we're able to sort of uncover what could be the instrumental reasons possibly that people might prefer female politicians. One of our results, that's one of the strongest results, has to do with this. People associate female politicians with a lower likelihood of being accused of corruption. So when they see never been accused of corruption, they're more likely to think that the candidate is a woman rather than a man. One key point in our in Santiago has an equation showing this. We think these associations are causal in both ways. So you tell me female politician, I can tell you 7 characteristics. You give me 1 characteristic, and then I can tell you if it's a man or a woman. So they're descriptive in that they're associations in that sense. So Santiago, I'll let him finish answering this question a little bit more.
I think it's a very good and important point. So one possibility is, and this is what the psychology literature normally does, is compare Catherine and Santiago, just 2 names, and then just please enumerate all the traits that come to mind, right? So that's the probability of having the traits as you were suggesting. So what we are doing is estimating that a given trait is enough for you to differentiate between male and female candidates, right? So and you can take this as an insignificant result, right? Is probably that capturing the idea that that you cannot tell that a male candidate is more likely to have that trait than a female candidate as something that makes them different, right? So we are, because what we are getting is we are using the effects of the traits on the beliefs for classifying the different profiles. That allows, but that does allows to make to use the quality that Catherine just showed, right? So we are basically using the effects rather than the information on the declared information on candidate sex, right? So the effects involve uncertainty and basically the inability to say, well, a given candidate has a given trait, right? Just because it's a male or female. But we definitely should give more thought to that very basic point. So I think it's a very good one.
This is, and Catherine's absolutely right when she says that it probably goes both ways, in the sense that if you tell a person about a bunch of characteristics, they might infer something about their gender. And so if the voter has preference for descriptive representation and also for, it's not exactly substantive representation, but representation of certain traits, right? That decision is happening sort of simultaneously. Voters have different weights on those things. And I'm a little unclear about how we, well, let me put it like this. The equation you put at the very beginning, where you have like voter outcomes and stereotypes, I think there's something also wrapped up in here with just sort of descriptive representation. And you might have the data to be able to actually disentangle those, but I'd have to think more about it, because it's not going to be straightforward, right? Because on the one hand, you have people making gender decisions given traits, In the other case, you have people making voter choices given traits. In that second case, they may well be also inferring something about somebody's gender.
Right.
You may be able, go ahead. I mean, just sort of talking this through. Well, yeah. I guess you may be able to convert the first experiment's results to what you would need to do that using Bayes' rule, just making some basic assumptions about the distribution of traits.
That's very valuable. Yeah, so thank you so much. I just wanted to mention that we have a third sample that includes candidate sex in the vote choice experiment. Right?
That would be helpful too, yeah.
Right. So, and so we, we of course, we get very, very similar results, but in an experiment where voters actually see the sex of the different candidates.
That would probably be enough to compare this experiment 2 and 3, right? Because they have the sex and they don't, and so you take away part of that inference, and so the difference is presumably going to be the marginal contribution of the descriptive representation. I really like the idea of trying to separate out this sort of I don't know what you call it, blunt. It's not exactly discrimination because it's positive in some cases, but like the sort of blunt effect of identity versus the inferred hidden traits that are going on in identity. And I know both of you guys are probably interested in how this differs across cultures, right? So you have US data here, but I know for a fact that Catherine's done previous studies on Latin American because she and I have corresponded about it. So how do you think this is going to differ in the US context versus, say, the Latin American context, the European context, or the Asian context?
Just right. So we ran the exact same experiment in using Facebook recruitment samples in Chile, Uruguay, and Brazil. The Brazilian data we're still collecting. I actually I expect to see the femininity exert a stronger positive effect, possibly in Chile and Uruguay. I didn't expect to see that the effect was be so large in the US sample, actually, particularly when we're talking about, and there's lots of heterogeneity, subgroup heterogeneity going on in the US sample, particularly between Democrats and Republicans. But other studies, and we're still collecting the data on Brazil, but other studies on candidate sex in Brazil show a strong pro-female impact, strong preferences for female candidates, and for different reasons. There's another study on gender stereotypes in Brazil that shows that these gender stereotypes are different from the US. There's different traits associated with women in politics in Brazil than in the United States. So our data will enable us to sort of compare these. I expect this pro-femininity results to hold in all of these countries. But interestingly, Uruguay has never had a woman run for president before. So we expect still to find a preference for femininity.
One thing, this study is really focused on how gender maps onto, or really how hidden traits map onto gender, right? And then how that information is processed by voters. What happens when somebody violates visibly? In other words, they reveal that they are not meeting the stereotypes of gender. So for example, what happens when a woman reveals herself to be involved in corruption, or a man focuses on childcare and healthcare policies, right? And the reason I'm thinking about this is because that thing I was just talking about with Catherine, right? That data, I mean, there's some debate about how strongly it shows it, but it seems to show that voters just don't believe it when you tell them that a woman is corrupt. And so if there's some sort of indubitable evidence, right, if it really comes out, how would you expect, do you have any data on, or how would you expect voters to react to sort of the breaking of the stereotype?
So the third experiment I was just mentioning, but we didn't present it today, that actually includes candidate sex as a trait or gender. It allows to uncover exactly that, right? So we can actually look what are the different effects given that the candidate is described as being a male or female candidate. And so this of course points toward our discussion about double standards, and in the sense that and we got, with the data we collected and the design in itself, it actually allows to analyzing double standards, basically whether femininity helps males politicians in a different way. That femininity, by femininity I'm talking about basically the latent dimension, right, from masculinity to femininity, right? So when we move toward the direction of femininity, what that affects differently profiles that are being described in the conjoint table as a male or female candidate. We don't want to anticipate much about the results. That's part of work in progress. However, I think we can illuminate a bit on just add more interesting results to the literature, the large literature on this issue about double standards.
That you referred to this in the very beginning of your talk. Women seem at least as successful when they run as men, at least in the US and perhaps in some other places as well. And your study seems to suggest that there may even be a slight preference for women, or at least for the traits that women are stereotypically supposed to hold. So why are parties leaving money on the table by not running, slates that are full of women? Are they just making an error, or is there something else going on?
Real quickly, candidate selection processes are very messy and male-dominated and masculinist. So it's true that there could be a myth that party leaders have that women are not as viable. A lot of party selection also depends, of course, on networks, and so the idea that there's no women who are ambitious enough to run. The party leaders may think that there's a supply problem when there really isn't. There's many other factors that can affect party selection in that sense. And we know, I think it's about less than 10% of presidential candidates in the region are female. And you do wonder why. And it could be a calculation problem as well. But I want to, note again, this difference between vote choice and viability. So, and this is another feature of our design that we didn't present today, but we actually have different vignettes. And the first vignette is for a primary. They give you a primary scenario, and it's the candidate gender, the vote choice, and the viability perceptions. And then the other one is just a regular general election. And we haven't analyzed those results, but that goes into the same ideas that maybe that people, when they're in a primary, they just really want to win. And so they're going to just choose the candidates they think that are most likely to win. Whereas maybe in a presidential contest, they'll be more likely to reveal their true vote choice or vote preference. But these viability perceptions, femininity doesn't help you on that, is what these results show. So they're different processes that have divergent outcomes.
It's really weird that that they're out of sync, right? I'm always sort of course it's not impossible, but I always wonder, like, well, why don't people, are we just not ruthless enough? Like, we haven't exploited every, I always assume generally that parties want to win and don't care how. And so I'm always like, a persistent misperception is not impossible, but I do kind of wonder, like, if that's what's going on, why? Because everyone's everyone's trying to squeeze out, at least in the United States, 1 or 2% margins.
Another point with this, Justin, is that these are very abstract scenarios. So there's a huge literature that suggests that the media, right, has a big impact on creating discrimination against women, double standards, all of this. We're trying to get at these sort of pure preferences, but in real life politics, there's a lot more. There's a lot more going on here, especially in terms of the media.
Yeah. So we have a question from the audience. Would you say, this is from an anonymous attendee, would you say that a part of the difference in the gender stereotypes comes from the prevalent perception that most elites are corrupt and the prevalence of male in those elites? So that's actually another Bayes rule calculation, right? Everyone's corrupt. Most of the people are male, ergo male equals corrupt.
Yeah, it could be. You know, what we're actually definitely one of the largest effects that we observed from the first experiment is about the consequence of corrections for beliefs about male candidates, and that's definitely probably related with masculine dominance in politics, and and the fact that corruption is probably a problem that everyone worries about. So so no doubt that that kind of association might be underlying this effect.
Well, we're almost out of time, and there aren't any questions on the board, so I think I will go ahead and thank Catherine and Santiago for being our presenters today. I want to remind everyone that I'll post this broadcast to the website. If you'd like to share it with someone else, share it with a colleague, or watch it again later. I also want to invite everyone to join us on April 15th, when we will host a talk from Adrian Lucardi of ITAM, the Instituto Tecnológico Autónomo de México. Please see our website, www.methods-colloquium.com, to get more information about this talk. Catherine and Santiago, this was really interesting. I'm, at least from a personal perspective, I really enjoyed this talk. So thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much, Justin.
Thank you, Sessions. It was a great opportunity to be here in the colloquium.
And I hope to see everyone in a little under a month.